question. Do the miracles of Jesus violate the physical laws of the universe? Regarding the miracles of Jesus that are presented to us in the four Gospels, the primary point of contention for critics is that they violate the laws of nature and are therefore impossible. By their very nature, miracles require a procedure that makes use of a physical law in a manner that we are as yet unaware. The idea that Jesus violated these physical laws is based upon the assumption that we fully know and understand the operation of these physical laws. And of course, we do not. What's often misunderstood regarding the miracles that Jesus exhibited is that they really did not violate any law. The physical laws of the universe do not define the outcome of events, only the manner in which they must occur. People have problems with the miracles that Jesus performed because human beings cannot do these things. Not many of us have seen something happen supernaturally in opposition to the normal laws of physics. What we don't realize is that science does not know all there is about these physical laws which govern the universe. What Jesus did, which we consider supernatural, were really just natural events that God is capable of because He created these laws. In essence, the universe itself is a miracle, as it appeared out of nowhere when there was no time, no space, no matter in existence before it began. Although scientists struggle to provide a naturalistic reason for the universe, the best answer so far is still the first sentence in the Bible. In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. Genesis 1:1. The reason that Genesis is a great description and our best answer for the origin of the universe is because we can actually validate that prior to the commencement of the universe, nothing existed. Time did not exist. There was no matter. There was no space for matter to expand and become stars and planets. Out of nothing, from nothing, for no apparent reason except that God said it's time. It's interesting that the word for create in Genesis 1:1 is from the Hebrew word bara, which means to create from nothing. Precisely what we see and hear from scientists as they state the origin of the universe. The matter that would create galaxies, stars, and planets came into existence simultaneously with the beginning of the universe. In the beginning, there was nothing. And then suddenly, everything came into being, or at least the primary elements that would become everything later on. Now, regarding the alternative explanations for the universe. Because a universe that appeared out of nothing at the beginning of time is so compelling for the support of God's existence, theoretical physicists have created a few alternative explanations for a universe through natural processes. Although new theories such as the multiverse, the bulk universe, and no boundary universe, they give us a theoretical explanation for its origin, we really have no way of testing these theories since we can't see beyond our present universe. In the words of many scientists today, the multiverse is not really science at all because it only exists in the theoretical and cannot actually be proven. All of the physical evidence that exists today proves that our universe was fine-tuned for life at minus 430th of a second so that we humans today could live upon the earth. If any of the 100 plus anthropic constants which make life possible were altered even slightly, no life would be possible. These constants which exist in the universe appeared at the beginning of the universe and have continued throughout its entire history. They exist to the present day. In examining these anthropic constants, we find that intelligence was necessary in order for these narrow boundaries to exist. Imagine a radio receiver before you with 122 dials. Each one of these dials must be precisely tuned to an exact setting before human beings can live on Earth. For a majority of these settings, their tolerances are as little as 1 part in a million billion, or 10 to the 15th. Alter any of these dials by this infinitesimal change and life on Earth would cease to exist. The reason we're able to conclude that these anthropic constants and their precise settings are evidence for God is because nothing of this precise nature could exist apart from a purposeful origin. The very nature of evolution is that random acts over long periods of time caused things to exist. In order for life to be present on Earth, all of these constants must be set first. Evolution does not allow for this possibility because random acts cannot produce 122 simultaneous events, all set precisely at once. The only way that this could happen is if someone set these dials before humans appeared on Earth. A universe tuned for life truly is the greatest miracle. This fine balance that permits life is observed all across the universe and on Earth. The fact that these fine-tuned constants exist and are necessary for life proves that we live in an environment that was purposely created for us, not by a natural process or happenstance. No natural process has the capacity to fine-tune an environment before life begins. The entire premise of evolution is that small changes took place over a great expanse of time. The problem is that unless these constants were all in place first, life could not have begun. Since this is a certainty, these facts precludes the theory of evolution from progressing to any certainty. In essence, the presence of a fine-tuned universe is empirical evidence for the existence of God and the impossibility of evolution or any naturalistic process to explain how life could exist. So, the miracles of Jesus, fact or fiction? The miracles that Jesus performed in the 4 Gospels are a demonstration of the same power and intelligence that would have been necessary to engineer and bring the universe into existence. Now, science does not know everything that can be known about the universe, and it's certain that there are laws or variables to these laws that are as yet undiscovered. For example, the idea that Jesus could turn water into wine is a concept that many scientists find impossible to believe. In spite of this, every day plants turn water into wine and no one pays much attention. It's not that Jesus accomplished these things that are impossible, but that we simply don't understand as yet the processes whereby he did these things. The idea that a man could speak and an event would happen is one that is a reality really today. I have Siri on my MacBook, and I can speak to her and she will dial a number on my phone, search for a name in my contacts, search for a subject on the internet, and perform many other helpful and constructive works. I accomplish these things by simply speaking to a machine. The idea that a being of infinite intelligence could exist, who has the technology to speak to a particular part of the universe and cause it to respond, is not really that difficult to imagine in our present day of technological wonders. Cosmologists state that the universe is the most complex machine that's ever existed. Some theories today venture into the idea that because everything in the universe is run by bits of digital information, which are in essence programs similar to those on a personal computer, that the universe acts as a quantum computer that makes all of these digital pieces of information operate. The question then would be, who's the programmer and the operator of these systems? There may be additional laws for the universe that are as yet unknown, that would allow a particular voice, a recognition pattern, or certain phrases, or even the origin of the voice itself to cause nature to respond to a particular command. The theory that plants respond to the sound of a human voice first became popular in 1848. when German professor Gustav Fechner published his book called Nana, which is the soul life of plants. In 2007, a group of scientists in South Korea at the National Institute of Agricultural Biotechnology developed a hypothesis that two of the genes that are involved in a plant's response to light, RBCs and ALD, were stimulated by music played at 70 decibels. The study found that the decibel range of normal human conversation is about 70 decibels. If the volume of a human voice is raised to a shout, also increasing the decibel level, the response of genes in a plant are also increased. Essentially, the human voice has power to cause changes in creation. In the book of Romans, chapter 8, it describes the current suffering of creation due to the fall of man as eliciting a moan in response to the degradation that it experienced as a result of a world filled with sin and evil. For the creation was subjected to futility, not willingly, but because of him who subjected it in hope, because the creation itself also will be delivered from the bondage of corruption into the glorious liberty of the children of God. We know that the whole creation groans and labors with birth pangs until now. Romans 8, 20 through 22. In Matthew's Gospel, chapter 21, we see that Jesus spoke to a fig tree and caused it to wither and die. Jesus' disciples asked him how this tree could respond so quickly to a simple command by him. Jesus' response? If you say to this mountain, be removed and be cast into the sea, it will be done. Now in the morning, as he returned to the city, he was hungry. And seeing a fig tree by the road, he came to it and found nothing on it but leaves, and said to it, let no fruit grow on you ever again. Immediately the fig tree withered away, and the disciples saw it, and they marveled, saying, how could the fig tree wither away so soon? So Jesus answered and said to them, assuredly I say to you, if you have faith and do not doubt, you will not only do what was done to the fig tree, but also, if you say to this mountain, be removed and be cast into the sea, it will be done. Matthew 21, 18 through 21. Now, based upon the scientific evidence that a human voice can cause a plant to respond, and reading Jesus' statements where he manipulates or commands the natural elements of earth, we gain some knowledge about how these things are possible. By simply speaking, Jesus was able to command a storm to calm, raise Lazarus from the dead, and command the universe into existence. There appears to be a law that's built into the universe that permits changes in the natural order by a particular voice or authority. It was the authority of Jesus as God that caused the universe to begin. We see this in Colossians chapter 1. For by Jesus all things were created that are in heaven and are on earth, visible and invisible, whether thrones or dominions or principalities or powers. All things were created through him and for him, and he is before all things, and in him all things consist. Colossians 1, 16 and 17. By the word of the Lord the heavens were made, and all the host of them by the breath of his mouth. Psalms 33, 6. So it was the voice of Jesus, according to the Bible, that caused the events described in the Gospels to take effect. The miracles of the four Gospels were commanded by the same voice that ordered the universe to begin. If human beings can build a machine that responds to a voice, it's certain that God can build a machine that can do the same. The universe is the greatest and most technologically advanced machine that's ever existed. The reason we cannot understand how miracles are possible is because most of us have never seen anything on earth that's comparable. All we know is that everything in life has a natural explanation. It's not that supernatural events are not possible, only that a majority of people never have experienced one. It's difficult for earthbound creatures to imagine an eternal and unlimited intelligence that has existed forever. The idea that God could simply speak and command the natural elements to obey His will is not an easy concept for people living in a natural world. Imagine what it was like for simple, uneducated fishermen to see Jesus stand up at the rear of their boat and raise His hands to the sky, commanding a raging storm to calm, and it obeyed. Peter asked, "Who can this be who has power over a storm with the sound of His voice?" Now when they had left the multitude, they took Him along in the boat as He was, and other little boats were also with Him, and a great windstorm arose, and the waves beat into the boat so that it was already filling. But He was in the stern, asleep on a pillow. And they awoke Him and said to Him, "Teacher, do you not care that we're perishing?" And then He arose, and He rebuked the wind, and He said to the sea, "Peace, be still." And the wind ceased, and there was a great calm. But He said to them, "Why are you so fearful? How is it that you have no faith?" And they feared exceedingly, and said to one another, "Who can this be, that even the wind and the sea obeys Him?" Mark 4:36 through 41. After Peter had labored all night and caught nothing, Jesus instructed him to go back out and throw his net into the water once again. Immediately Peter felt his net fill with fish, so that it was tearing under the weight of so many fish. Peter realized that Jesus was not from this world, and perhaps this really was the eternal God who was standing before him. Peter immediately felt a sense of awe at this realization and his own sense of shame in the imperfections of his life. So it was, as the multitude pressed about him to hear the word of God, that he stood by the lake of Gennesaret. And he saw two boats standing by the lake, but the fishermen had gone from them and were washing their nets. Then he got into one of the boats, which was Simon's, and asked him to put out a little from the land. And he sat down, and he taught the multitudes from the boat. When he had stopped speaking, he said to Simon, "Launch out into the deep and let down your nets for a catch." But Simon answered and said, "Master, we've toiled all night and have caught nothing. Nevertheless, at your word I will let down the net." And when they had done this, they caught a great number of fish, and their net was breaking. So they signaled to their partners in the other boat to come and help them, and they came and filled both boats so that they began to sink. When Simon Peter saw it, he fell down at Jesus' knees, saying, "Depart from me, for I am a sinful man, O Lord." For he and all who were with him were astonished at the catch of fish which they had taken. From Luke 5:1 through 9. So, Jesus and the idea of quantum physics. In our present world, we live within 4 dimensions: length, height, width, and time. In string theory, within quantum physics, scientists tell us that up to 11 dimensions may exist. John records that after Jesus was resurrected, he appeared to them suddenly within a room with a locked door. Now, some commentators have stated that Jesus was able to move through the physical structures of the walls without harm to his physical body. In order to confirm that he was not a ghost or other spirit entity, Jesus instructed his disciples to touch him and see that he did not have flesh and bones. Then, the same day at evening, being the first day of the week, when the doors were shut where the disciples were assembled, for fear of the Jews, Jesus came and he stood in the midst, and he said to them, "Peace be with you." When he said this, he showed them his hands and his side, and the disciples were glad when they saw the Lord. John 20:19 through 20. After 8 days, his disciples were again inside, and Thomas with them. And Jesus came, and the doors, notice, were shut, and he stood in the midst and said, "Peace to you." Then he said to Thomas, "Reach your finger here and look at my hands. Reach your hand here and put it into my side. Don't be unbelieving, but believing." And Thomas answered and said to him, "My Lord and my God." John 20, verses 26 through 28. So if you notice the text here, it doesn't state that Jesus walked through the walls. John writes that Jesus suddenly appeared before the disciples in the room which they occupied. Now, quantum physicists who have examined this text, they state that in order for Jesus to appear suddenly in this room without going through a physical structure, that this would require access to a sixth dimension. When you or I move from the dimension of length to width, we are able to freely move without encountering a physical barrier. In the same way, when Jesus moved from a sixth dimension to our three-dimensional world, he did not need to pass through a closed door or a wall. Jesus suddenly appeared from an unseen dimension. What was it that enabled Jesus to accomplish this supernatural event? In dimension 1, illustrated by a horizontal line for length, dimension 2, a second vertical line for height, illustrated as a square, and dimension 3, a third line for depth, illustrated as a cube. The following dimensions are not perceivable by a human being, but they do have a profound effect upon the universe and reality as we know it. Dimension 4, comprised of time itself, which governs all the properties of matter at any given point. And in order to plot a course in the universe, all of these first four dimensions are necessary. In dimension 5, every dimension from here on presents a list of difficulties for physicists. In quantum physics and superstring theory, the fifth and sixth dimension present us with the possibilities for other parallel worlds or multiple universes. In the fifth dimension, we would see these other worlds, which are currently invisible to us within our current four dimensions. Dimension 6, within this dimension comes the possibility of travel through time, either forward or backward. It's also within the sixth dimension that we may be able to perceive the commencement of other universes, if this is in fact true, like our own, which began with similar conditions. Now, a reminder, this is still theoretical and unprovable. It's in this dimension, the sixth dimension, that physicists use to assert that our finely tuned universe could have come from millions of others, which also display constants that enable life to exist. The problem is we can't see the other universes, and we can't prove this. In dimension 7, we see conditions that were present in our universe and other possible universes that are proposed by physicists. In dimension 8, the ability to see infinitely all things that pertain to reality, the existence of other universes, and their conception is possible. In dimension 9, the capacity to perceive all the laws of physics that made other universes or were responsible for the beginning of our universe are possible, and the conditions which made their existence in these other parallel dimensions are also possible. Within dimension 10, everything that is possible and imaginable can be perceived. Scientists state that as mortals, this is as far as we could go by our natural limitations. It's apparent that the process of death for our physical body removes the limits of four dimensions and allows our non-material soul and spirit that remains to access the other dimensions that might exist. This ability may appear as a supernatural event when in fact it's simply a facet of the physical laws that already exist. The idea that anything which appears as miraculous is contrary to the physical laws of the universe is incorrect. It's certain that there are aspects of physics which are currently not understood. that could explain the supernatural events described by the four Gospels as properties within the laws of physics. Now, some critics have stated that if Jesus is really God and the author of the physical laws of the universe, then he violated his own laws by the miracles that are described by the four Gospels. Atheist David Hume once said that a miracle is a violation of the laws of nature, and as a firm and unalterable experience has established these laws. The proof against a miracle from the very nature of the fact is as entirely as any argument from experience can possibly be imagined. What is often misunderstood regarding the miracles that Jesus exhibited is that they really did not violate any law. As I stated earlier, the physical laws of the universe do not define the outcome of events, only the manner in which they must occur. When Jesus raised Lazarus from the dead, he still died later. Jesus did not violate the laws of physics. He simply displayed his ability to suspend these laws for a moment in time. What we find when we really study the text of the Bible is that sickness, suffering, and death were not a part of the original creation of God. Sin interrupted this perfection and caused our physical world to take an unnatural course. All that Jesus did in healing and raising the dead was to suspend the present law of sin and death for a time in order to demonstrate his credentials as the creator of all that exists. If you think about it, it's sickness and death which violate the original intent of these laws that govern the universe. Jesus simply showed us what this world will be like once he has permanently eliminated the law of death. And really, this was the entire point of Jesus' arrival on earth, to stop the curse which came as a result of sin, which is itself a fracture in the laws of the universe. Prior to sin entering the world, everything worked perfectly. There was no sickness or death on the earth. We all seem to understand that sickness and death are unnatural, and it's a mystery to most of us why we must die. Death interrupts and tarnishes the perfect life that would otherwise be possible if it did not exist in our world. The evil that we see present was also not a part of the perfect work that God originally created. This is also a fracture in the laws of the universe. The problem for us is that we've become so accustomed to these things that we've assumed that evil, suffering, sickness, and death are just natural parts of our world, but they're not. What Jesus did in displaying his power over the physical laws was no violation, but really a restoration of what these laws looked like before sin entered the world. It's also certain that heaven exists as a physical place of residence in a dimension that we are presently unaware. Those who are no longer limited by their physical bodies may inhabit this place if they choose. Paul wrote to the church at Corinth, and he informed them that one of the reasons that our present bodies must die is that flesh and blood in its current configuration cannot inherit the kingdom of heaven. It's a different dimension. Now this I say, brethren, that flesh and blood cannot inherit the kingdom of God, nor does corruption inherit incorruption. 1 Corinthians 15:50. It is possible that upon the death of our bodies, our soul and our spirit have access to these other dimensions. In theory, a person who's been freed from their body may be able to see into these dimensions. This would explain why many people who have died have described other beings and physical properties of other worlds that we cannot perceive while alive. As we come to understand these things, as we know better how these things work, I think that you'll see that the miracles of Jesus were nothing more than common events that are possible because he is God. What I've shared with you in this video is from my new book, Why Jesus is God. I devote a great part of this book to demonstrating how the miracles of Jesus were a natural part of these physical laws of the universe. Now, these incredible abilities are what we would expect from God. If He exists, if He would come and show Himself to us and seek to prove that He really does exist. The things that Jesus did is what we would expect. So let us continue together on this journey, and perhaps you will learn a few things that will open your mind to a greater awareness of this incomparable God in the magnificent universe He created for us. You can find my book, Why Jesus is God, at Amazon and also at my website. There's an address that I'll leave for you at the end of this video. Have an incredible day as you contemplate the magnificence of God, who possesses power and intelligence that is infinite, but He also loves you with an everlasting love.